For our top story this hour, we travel to Belgrade, Serbia, where RT correspondent Mihailovich is working on a very special report reflecting on the destruction of the former Yugoslavia and NATO's devastating war on the country. In an exclusive report for In Question, Alex tells us how people are still suffering from an invisible killer which haunts the region.
Hi, Anya. I'm here in Serbia with the RT team doing a three-part series on the NATO bombings in 1999. The 20-year anniversary is going to be March 24th, 2019. And of course, we're going to be airing this at that time. But now we're looking at the ramifications, the damage that was done by NATO nearly 20 years ago. In the background, you can see one of the buildings that was actually hit. That's physical damage, but much of the damage here is actually mental damage and damage that you can't see as looking at this building. The type of damage we're talking about is cancer. A lot of depleted uranium was used right here on the ground, not in Belgrade per se, but in the southern part of Serbia and Kosovo, and people are dying. We're hearing that from medical experts, we're hearing that from the government, and we're hearing that from people who are actually from small towns. There are small towns that literally streets have been annihilated, and not by bombs at the time of a bombing, but people dying over the years of cancer. Places where people used to live to over 100 years old, people are now dying in their 40s, 50s, and 60s from cancer. So this is one part of the big story here, what's happening in Serbia. And we did talk to the Minister of Defense, Aleksandar Vulin, and he told us this.
There are also consequences of using depleted uranium, or DU, something the world is still shy about and does not dare discuss the link between it and health issues we're well aware of. That was not directed just against our military, but against our life in general, against every living being in Serbia. Pristina authorities have forbid any research into depleted uranium in Kosovo, but DU doesn't know Serb from Albanian. It kills equally, as it killed Italian soldiers and others who came to Kosovo afterward.
Now, the government of Serbia is planning to sue NATO when it comes to depleted uranium. This is alongside some private lawsuits and smaller lawsuits, all the way from ad hoc courts in Israel to bigger courts in Europe. We know that in Italy there has been some compensation given to soldiers who suffered from the depleted uranium used in Kosovo. So this is a precedent that Serbia is hoping to use in their defense and in their lawsuit against NATO. Back to you.
In August, leaders from Serbia and Kosovo announced they are considering a plan to change the border which separates the two territories in a bid to quell ethnic tensions in the region. The deal would reportedly see Kosovo absorb Serbia's southern Preševo Valley. In exchange, Serbia would gain control of Kosovo's northern Mitrovica region, where Serbs are an ethnic majority. The United States and European Union are so far open to endorsing such an arrangement. However, Germany has raised concerns over the proposal. According to German media, Berlin's Minister of European Affairs, Michael Roth, tweeted, quote, "Such a move would open a Pandora's box of ethnic recriminations. The future of the Western Balkans is just a multi-ethnic, religious, and cultural one, united in diversity. That's Europe." What's more, Kosovo's prime minister announced his opposition to the plan put forward by his own president, telling the Irish Times such a move would, quote, mean war. With the former Yugoslavia in question, RT producer Nebojsa Malic joined the show to talk about his experience growing up in the country and witnessing its destruction. So, Neb, some irony there in the German minister's comments. Was that Pandora's box not opened by NATO already?
Well, specifically by the nascent EU back in 1991, when it decided to start recognizing republics willy-nilly and let people declare independence almost wherever, and then denied that right to some, but promote it to others and not really keep consistent about the rules involved. The 1999 bombing, which we're coming up on the 20th anniversary on, was really the worst of them all because it wasn't sanctioned by the United Nations. It went against the NATO Charter itself. It went against the U.S. Constitution. Pretty much every single rule that existed at the time was violated to make it happen. And after 78 days of trying to defeat the Yugoslav military, which it couldn't, NATO agreed to an armistice and then promptly occupied Kosovo, turned it to this Kosovo Liberation Army, and put a border there.
Let's get into that exactly, because viewers might not be aware that some countries don't actually recognize Kosovo as a nation. Why is that?
So about half the UN members, numbers-wise, about 2/3 of the population of the world, numbers-wise. Basically, the U.S. and some of its allies, not all, have recognized it. The U.S. has led the way in recognition of the self-declared independent state that was proclaimed in February of 2008, so just over 10 years ago. And the idea was, okay, well, you know, Serbia's forfeited the right to its province because of some atrocities that remain vague, and we may have overblown during the bombing, and we're not going to talk about them. We're just going to assume they happened. Okay, anybody who questions this is evil. And they went with this, and they're trying to force Serbia basically to the previous two American administrations. It didn't really matter what the rest of the world says. It mattered if Serbia accepts it. If they can get Serbia to accept it, then it's a done deal. You know, once Serbia admits that Kosovo's gone, then there's no point in it. Doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. And that's, I think, behind this newest initiative for a land swap, which seems to be, it seems like some people in the West are contradicting each other, and they're sort of arguing with their own shadows, and it's not really clear who's behind this and who proposed it. But the purpose of it is to make sort of assume the sale. Okay, Kosovo is independent, let's see how we can tweak it. Well, no, it's not, and we can't.
Interesting. We hear so much about ethnic tensions in the former Yugoslavia. Can you compare that with your experience growing up there and why you believe NATO targeted the country? So, growing up there, we had this whole notion of brotherhood and unity, and okay, we're different people with, you know, or slightly different people, as the saying went, with distinct customs, and every voice matters, and we, you know, it was a practice of diversity, sort of top down, but it had filtered down into most segments of the population. And then all of a sudden, when that socialist system started stalling in 1990-91 with the demise of the Berlin Wall. I mean, Yugoslavia was never part of the Eastern Bloc. It was a neutral country. It wasn't like dictated from the Soviet Union or anything, so you would say, okay, well, you know, the external conqueror just left, what are we going to do? No. At the moment that people there started talking democracy and elections, and then the U.S. said, oh, by the way, all these loans and all this aid that we've been giving you for years to ensure your neutrality, we're going to condition that on democratic elections in republics, not the federation, not the entire country, but the individual republics. They basically said, we're going to start recognizing pieces of your country. All of a sudden created an incentive for political pluralism, which on principle is fine, except that the only other ideology that was on hand was nationalism. And so you had ethnic parties, and all of a sudden the census became the ballot box, and the ballot box became the cartridge box, and then we had war. And border lines became about ethnic divisions, and now we even have the term Balkanize, which means to essentially take a country, split it up among ethnic divisions. Not something we usually consider to be totally a positive development. I think here, especially in the United States, we value diversity. So it's interesting that abroad, NATO's policies have resulted in these divisions. It's one of those do as I say, not as I do. Right. RT producer Nebojsa Malic, thanks a lot.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.